Welcome to the Bass Hole Podcast, the show where we talk bass fishing without the filters, the fluff, or the tournament politics. And I'm Bob from Bob's Bassing and Stuff, and this is my co-host Ray. And today, we're talking about the legends of bass fishing. The guys that were on Saturday mornings when we were young with their fishing shows, the original content creators. We're going to talk about Bill Dance, Hank Parker, Roland Martin, and Jimmy Houston. So, Ray, let's start off talking about Bill Dance. Let me look at my notes for a second. Just in case you don't remember, Bill Dance was on TV from 1968 till the present day. That's 50 years on television with Bill Dance Outdoors. Bill Dance won 3 Bassmaster tournaments. He was runner-up for Angler of the Year twice, and he was one of the founding fathers of pro bass fishing. Now, Ray, do you remember watching Bill Dance when you were coming up?
I do. Saturday mornings.
Saturday mornings. And what were some of the things you liked about Bill's show?
Oh, he was funny.
The humor in Bill Dance's shows is what stands out to me.
He took a show of fishing and turned it into almost like a comic show.
Yeah, he was an entertainer as much as he was a fisherman.
He was. And it was funny to watch him because I remember he was so funny, but boy, he could catch some big fish.
Oh, he caught a lot of big fish on camera.
On camera. So he was probably one of my favorites to watch.
Yeah, he was certainly one of my top 2.
Yeah.
The thing that I liked about Bill Dance was when he would show his blooper reels.
Oh, yeah.
They were hilarious. Some of the stuff, I mean, it's stuff that happens probably to a lot of us fishermen that nobody gets to see, but he showed it all. And he made it okay as a bass fisherman and as a human to laugh at yourself.
Yeah. The one I really remember is when I think he fell off the boat or the motor fell or something.
He had one where the motor fell off the boat. Yeah. He also had one where he set the hook and his seat broke and he flipped off the other side. I mean, just tons and tons of good stuff.
Yeah. And to me, that's what set him aside because he did show the reality of being out there.
Right.
It's not just, a lot of fishing shows you watch now, they cast it to fish every time.
Right.
Because they're not showing the ones in between, the hang-ups, and
right.
The ones you don't catch fish on.
Right.
And he was realistic with it.
He was.
So that's what I enjoyed about it.
And he still had the teaching moments, where he explained the baits and how to present them and all that. So you still had the learning, but you had the entertainment of it too. And he was probably the best at the entertainment part.
Oh, absolutely. One of the ones I remember you told me about, and it sticks in my mind all the time, is talking about worm fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me one time, and I don't remember seeing this one as growing up, but he said any color is fine as long as it's purple.
Right, yeah. And, to be perfectly honest, AJ reminded me of that one time when we were out fishing, and he actually quoted Bill Dance. He said, like Bill Dance said, any color will work worm fishing as long as it's purple.
Yeah. And
he also did the same thing with the Palomar knot. He said, you can tie any knot you want as long as it's Palomar.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny that AJ reminded me of that, and then I reminded you of that, and still a good memory of stuff that he did on his show that was just so different than everybody else.
Yeah, and I remember those shows because, I don't really watch fishing shows anymore. I love to fish. I love to be outdoors.
Well, you watch Bob's Bassing and Stuff.
Of course. Of course, I have to watch those.
I hear you.
So, but I remember watching those because it was like, and me growing up, and I was born in 7.
Yeah.
So me growing up, 10, 15 years old, Saturday mornings was nothing but wrestling and fishing shows.
That's it, yeah.
But I used to love watching those old shows with those guys. And like you said, those were the legends.
Oh, yeah.
There was only 4 or 5.
Yeah.
But they all had their unique way of fishing. But Bill Dance was probably my favorite just because of the humor he had in his shows.
He did have that. Okay, next we're going to talk about Hank Parker. And a little story about Hank Parker. Not a personal story, but Hank Parker was born and raised in the same town that I was, in Maiden, North Carolina. And I actually worked with one of his childhood friends growing up, Bruce, and his brother Barry grew up with Hank Parker. And Hank is not his real name, and I can't remember, unfortunately, what his real name is. But Bruce told a story that Bruce and Barry's mother, was one of the few people that ever called Hank by his real first name. But yeah, Hank is from my hometown. I've heard a few stories about him running around with the Spake brothers, and so that was pretty cool. Finding out that I was working with childhood friends of Hank's after following him so many years. Hank Parker was a 2-time Bassmaster Classic champ. Okay, that's a big deal. Those years were 1979 and 1989, and Hank was known for being serious and dedicated, and just really explained the way fishing is supposed to be done. He wasn't as humorous as Bill, but he was more direct. Caught a ton of huge fish on camera. You can go back on YouTube and find his shows and look at those, and it's amazing some of the fish. And he fished with a lot of celebrities too. Yeah. That's the thing I remember about him more so than Bill Dance or Roland Martin, was that Hank a lot of times fished with race car drivers, and he fished with actors, and the Terry Bradshaws and those type of people. So I remember him for that, and then him just being really serious and a really good fisherman, and then of course him being from my hometown made him probably one of my top 2 as well.
Right, and let's not forget, Hank wasn't just a fisherman; he was an outdoorsman.
Yeah,
he's a hunter too, and I'll tell you a story about Hank Parker. I've never met Hank before, but I know a guy, and he's another farmer,
mm-hmm.
and he lives in Mountain View area. It's not far from Maiden. He actually is a land real estate person, and he is friends with Hank, and he hunts with Hank,
mm-hmm.
And so they'll go on hunts together. Now I don't know, haven't seen this guy. I know in a few years, but back when I used to go help work his cattle, or take cattle to him and stuff like that with another friend of mine, he would talk about Hank and how he has a trip he's getting ready to go on him with. So he's a really local guy. That's one thing I know about him, that talking about he's from Maiden, mm-hmm. is he actually, I know someone that actually is friends with him.
Yeah. Well, he lives in Denver, North Carolina now, which isn't far from Maiden.
No, it's not far. But like you say, he is the kind of guy that, like you say, he's more methodical in his approach, and he did do a lot of celebrity stuff.
Yeah,
with these guys.
He's very intelligent too. I've watched a lot of his podcasts. He has a podcast, and some of the things that he tells about how he got started with his fishing show. He talked about how much it cost him to get started making his show, because he bought that stuff and paid for it.
That's right.
To film his own show. And it's really impressive that his business mind behind that. Mm-hmm. Then later on he got into racing a little bit, which I think he ended up maybe losing some money on that deal when his son wanted to be a race car driver, or was a race car driver. Him and his sons had a hunting show that went on for years that I really enjoyed watching. Yes. Deer hunting. And so he's just really made some really good business decisions. And Hank was also a really good friend of Dale Earnhardt Sr.
Yes, sir. I was getting ready to say that.
And if you go, I've watched Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s podcast when he's had Hank on, and Hank's telling stories about Dale Earnhardt Sr., mm-hmm. and it's very interesting. You should go watch that podcast. Yeah. It's really cool.
Before you even said that, I was going to say that Hank Parker is like the fisherman of Dale Earnhardt Sr. racing.
Right.
He was that in tune to his sport.
He was.
And like you say, he figured out what worked and went with it. And that's, it was his living. So, yeah, very, very smart individual. To me, I think he was ahead of his time.
He was, yeah. Still is.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how old is Hank now? I mean,
he has to be, he run around with Bruce and Barry. He's got to be in his 70s. Yeah. Check out Hank Parker's podcast. It's really good. I saw one not long ago where he was talking about Come Here Deer first come out. Now, they ended up sponsoring his hunting show for years. Tells a story about when some guys come in and they were actually taking some Come Here Deer to somebody else, and after they had visited Hank, and they ended up not being able to make their next trip, and he bought all the Come Here Deer from them, just based on them telling him how miraculous it was. And his sons had told him that he made a mistake buying a great big bunch of that before they'd ever tried it. But then when they tried it, it just drew the deer in from all over the place.
So you telling me I've been doing this wrong for all these years?
All the corn, yeah, it should have been come here deer.
Well, no, I thought the come here deer, I've been sitting in the woods saying, come here deer.
Oh, you just been saying it.
Yeah, I mean, is it a product that you can buy?
Yeah, it's actually something you buy in a bag.
Okay, because I started saying it never worked for me.
It never worked for you.
No,
You were doing, come here, like the guy in the video.
That's right. No wonder I didn't see this.
That's probably why you wasn't seeing it. But anyway, go watch Hank's podcast. It's really cool. Next, we're going to talk about Roland Martin. Roland is a 9-time Bassmaster winner, and he's in the Pro Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And Martin, he was pretty much the bass fishing scientist on TV. He's the one that I first remember talking about barometric pressure and fish behavior and things beyond just the lure choice and the watercolor and things like that.
Right.
Very detailed, very smart, just a amazing guy. And he was a pretty good entertainer. He had the catchphrase, son, and look at that bass. And he'd pull up a 2-pounder and act like it was, a 10-pounder. But he just always was excited about the fish he caught. Really enjoyed him. But now he's kind of the patriarch of the greatest fishing family, the royalty of bass fishing, with his son Scott Martin. He's been on TV and YouTube now for decades.
Right.
And then now they have his granddaughter, Roland's granddaughter, and Scott's daughter, Hillary Martin, who's a big YouTuber. She is, I think, currently enrolled at Alabama and is on their bass fishing team at Alabama University.
She catches a lot of fish.
She catches a lot of fish and a lot of big fish. Mm-hmm. Good bass fisherman.
Yeah, I remember watching Roland too. I remember the sunglasses.
Yeah, the sunglasses. I always had the sunglasses.
Talking about somebody that takes it even to a different level, studying fish. Okay, that takes hours in the seat. When you're trying to get an edge on a sport, a lot of it is being out there, observation, behavior.
Most of it, especially back then, there was no internet. You couldn't go and Google something or look at a video of somebody else that knows how to do it.
Fish will get used to a certain bait. If it's fished all the time in that water, then the next best thing comes out and it works for a while because they're not used to it or it's something different. So you have to be able to adapt to that. And I think that's one thing Roland Martin did. I mean, he helped shed light on, hey guys, you need to do a little studying the fish or the game that you're after. He was like a leading guy for that.
Yeah.
To teach that.
Kind of a pioneer.
Oh, absolutely. And why do you think he caught fish?
Yeah.
Because he did that.
Right.
And look if you look at today, people fishing, real anglers, tournament fishing, a lot of that's based on his concept.
He pretty much built the blueprint for what current anglers do today.
That's right.
Okay, now we're going to talk about Jimmy Houston. Jimmy Houston Outdoors ran from 1978 and went almost 40 years.
Wow.
Jimmy won multiple Bassmaster events and qualified for numerous classics and was known as one of the most consistent fishermen of his era. On his show, he was known for his feathered hair and loud-colored shirts. Now, I always thought Jimmy brought style and confidence to the television screen. I thought one of his best attributes was teaching you to be confident in the bait you're throwing and that bait was the one that was going to catch fish. I mean, he talked about a bait like it was the do everything. It was going to be what caught you the fish.
Right.
And so you would have confidence when you throw it. And as you know, that makes a difference when you're throwing a bait, especially a new one you've never done before. If you've said, well, Jimmy Houston said this thing can catch a ton of fish,
right.
You felt more confident throwing that bait and would put it in more places and get it in front of more fish by throwing it a little longer than you would if you just picked up a new bait and threw it a while and didn't catch anything and put it down.
And I think the theory behind that is he taught you to, anybody can throw a bait a couple times. And we're bad to say, well, I'm not catching any fish on it. We'll just throw it back in the tackle.
Right.
To me, he taught you to don't give up so easy on it.
Right.
There's different ways you can work it.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've seen somebody say, we all if we're throwing the same bait, we all have different motions in us
Oh, yeah.
to make it work different,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're trying to or not. And one thing I'll say about Jimmy, growing up, when you went fishing, Dad's like, "Oh, don't wear that color shirt. The fish will see you."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Can't wear nothing bright.
He proved that wrong, didn't he?
And so if I had to go on that theory, I mean, look at the shirts that Jimmy wore.
Right.
So that didn't have nothing to do with it.
No, it sure didn't.
But I remember that growing up.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
I mean, if you're fishing for bedded fish in shallow water and cast a shadow over them, they'll notice that, but they ain't going to see the color shirt you're wearing inside of them.
That's right.
But anyway, I always thought Jimmy brought a lot of energy and excitement to the show. He had that personality. It was a little more out there and a little more wired than the other guys that were kind of calmer.
And you can tell that because, I mean, of what he wore.
Yeah.
He's just a brighter fellow.
Yeah, fit his personality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think they each had their thing that they brought.
They did.
And that's why they all were on TV with their different shows.
Right.
You were still watching fishing.
Right.
But every episode was different.
Right.
With just a different person.
I agree. And I think the fact that they were so different is why they all lasted so long. If they'd have just been carbon copies of each other, it wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. Yeah. Because on those Saturday mornings, I could watch one and then flip the channel and watch another.
Yeah.
And you got to think back then, 3 or 4 channels was all you were looking at, before the cable came along. Yeah. And so you had limited choices anyway. But if it would have just been the same thing on a different channel with a different guy in the boat, it would have gotten bored. But it didn't, because they were all so different and had their own things.
That's right. You got to remember, when we grew up, now, people, we are in the era where we were outside turning an antenna by hand.
Right. That's exactly right.
So we're that old. But it didn't seem like it was long ago. But yeah, they all each had a certain thing they brought to that era. Mm-hmm. And it was fun. It was fun.
I always enjoyed their shows and learned a lot from them. And, back then, like I said, there wasn't Google. You couldn't look up on YouTube and get a master class on, whatever you wanted to see.
And I think they could have took a zip code 33 and done the same thing they're doing on.
Probably so.
Because they're smart about fishing. And the way you get smart about anything is the work you put into it.
Right.
They all had their own niche, and they were all smart. But one thing they had in common was they all knew how to catch fish.
Yeah, they were all great fishermen.
And you know what? They probably learned a lot from each other.
Probably so, yeah.
It would have been nice to have a channel back then to where they all had a fishing tournament together.
Oh, yeah, just those 4. That would have been great. I would have loved to watch that.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Because there'd have been some talking going on.
Oh, absolutely.
Great anglers. I miss those days.
Me too, yeah.
I wished it was more like that today.
I know that on the Saturday mornings when we were watching, I was sitting there watching Bill Dance, Roland Martin, Jimmy Houston, Hank Parker, and I was dreaming of the next time that I'd get to be on the lake. And I would try and implement some of the things that I learned from them. And so thinking back, a lot of what I know about bass fishing, the foundation was laid back in those days of my teenage years by these guys. And, I've added to that. I've learned a lot on YouTube, and we're on YouTube. I'm certainly not going to badmouth it. It's a great source, but it's a source they didn't have. And it's a source we didn't have when we were young. Yeah. And so we learned from these guys. So my foundation of knowledge for bass fishing came from these 4 guys.
Well, but they all had good techniques.
They did.
All they had to do was watch each other.
They were all great, and they caught so many big bass. And, they didn't have forward-facing sonar or anything like that. They were out there with, the little line depth finders, and they were still catching huge fish, great big bags, winning tournaments.
That's right.
It's a testament to their fishing talent, what all they did. All right, guys. Well, here is to Bill Dance, Hank Parker, Roland Martin, and Jimmy Houston. Thank you for all you did, guys. We sure did enjoy it, and we learned a lot from you. Thanks for tuning in to the Bass Hole Podcast. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep bassing. Thanks for tuning in to the Bass Hole Podcast.